When you assume that you're on the same page, you so often end up making a mess of things and making them way harder than they need to be. I'm Dr. Denham, and I'm here to help you cut through all the crap online with information that you can trust. If you're the kind of person who bends over backwards to help other people, who rearranges your own needs to accommodate everyone else, who wants to show up for the people that you love, but end up feeling a little worn out, overlooked, or even taken for granted, I have a story for you. When we assume others think and value things the way we do, we end up hurt, exhausted, and misunderstood. Let me tell you exactly what I mean by that. I was talking with one of my favorite clients recently who is so good at showing up for people. She's the type of person who moves mountains to help people that she cares about. In this situation, her husband had called her and asked if she could come pick him up from an appointment that he was waiting at. And, true to fashion, she did not hesitate. She moved around 2 or 3 things that she had on her schedule. She missed her workout, and she made it all fit. Why? Because he asked. And because he matters to her. She assumed that since he was asking, it must be important. So she drove, I don't remember what she said, 20 or 30 minutes one way or each way. She waits another 30 minutes in the car. And then as she was talking to him, she found out that the whole thing was only going to take an hour. So there was no crisis. There was no urgency. He just thought that it might be easier for him if she came and grabbed him. So at this point, she's now spent a few hours and missed multiple commitments that mattered to her when he could have just waited out the appointment in the same amount of time. And she, much to her credit, brought it up to him. And he said, well, you could have said no. And this is the point that I want to try to highlight here. Because the way that her brain works, in her mind, if someone she loves is asking for help, she naturally assumes that it's really important and that they really need the help or they wouldn't be asking. After all, she thinks and rethinks and overthinks through everything super thoroughly, and she only asks for help when she absolutely needs it, when she's completely out of any other option and desperate enough to justify, at least in her mind, putting someone else out to help her. So the conclusion that she naturally drew was, well, he knows how busy I am, so if he's asking, it must be important. But his brain doesn't function like hers does. And he actually just thought, well, I really don't want to just be sitting here waiting for an hour if I don't have to. I'll see if she can come grab me. 2 totally different lenses. So who's the one being unhealthy here? Neither of them was wrong. What was unhealthy was that they assumed and didn't clarify with each other. They didn't talk about it overtly. They both made quiet assumptions. And as a result, they ended up in a completely avoidable moment of frustration and disconnection. So how does this apply to your life? I'm sharing this because this is such a common pattern, especially for people who care deeply and whose default is to bend over backwards and to show up for others. People who notice the emotional temperature of others. If that's you, you might really be relating to this. You struggle to say no, even if it costs you. You rarely ask for help yourself. Why? Because you don't want to inconvenience anyone. You consistently give 110% to show up for the important people in your life. And then sometimes feel confused when it doesn't seem to mean as much to them as your sacrifice does to you. And then when things do feel a little weird or off emotionally, your brain starts spinning. Did I do something wrong? Did they not appreciate what I did? Am I too much? Why am I always the one that cares this much? That spiral that goes on inside you, where you doubt yourself, where you overthink everything, and maybe even withdraw as a result, isn't just you being anxious or insecure. In those moments, your brain is trying to make sense of something that feels emotionally unsettled to you. In these moments, most people don't really understand what's going on that feels so yucky inside. Most people who repeatedly find themselves in these types of scenarios just assume and react. They either overgive or shut down, or get passive aggressive or resentful, all while telling ourselves, I'm just trying to be helpful. But here's the thing I want you to remember. Helping at the cost of your own clarity and connection backfires because it isn't healthy, and unhealthy doesn't work, regardless of the reasons we're being unhealthy. It ends up being self-abandonment disguised as generosity, and it violates a really important relationship principle. Research shows that there needs to be a balance of give and take in relationships. Both partners need to feel like they're each holding up about 50% of the equation. In relationships, you have both merit and obligation. And in a partnership, we have very high levels of merit. We are entitled to very high levels of both sensitivity and availability from the important people in our lives. And we have equally high levels of obligation to provide those very same things. And when that balance gets off, it ends up creating either resentment because we feel taken advantage of, or it makes us feel guilty because we feel like we're taking advantage of the other person. And here's what's actually going on in this situation. The dynamic that played out between these two isn't random. It is rooted in temperament and super predictable. There's a particular temperament. It's what I call a C in my core temperament model that's wired to create comfort, to avoid emotional disruption, and keep the peace. C's feel things deeply. They're emotionally intuitive, and they usually believe something like, if I can just be thoughtful enough, helpful enough, selfless enough, then everything will stay calm and I'll feel connected. I'll be able to stay connected. Unfortunately, when you assume you know what's going on behind the scenes in somebody else's mind, or that they're coming from the same place that you are, which I will also just say is an assumption that most of us make. We tend to assume that other people's minds work more or less the same way that ours do, and that people do things for more or less the same reasons that we do them or that we don't do them. But the research is super clear that's not true. Different people are motivated by different things, and temperament influences and even dictates why it is that we do the things that we do and why we don't do the things that we don't do. Unfortunately, when you do this, you're setting yourself up to be hurt, because not everybody does think like you. Not everyone acts the same way that you do. Not everyone waits until they're desperate to say, I need help. So what do? Well, we communicate clearly and we stop mind reading. One of the most important communication rules is to say what you mean and believe what is said. So in this story about my client, what could she have done or what could she have said to change the situation? She could have said something like, hey, I'd love to help. And I can absolutely come get you if it's super important. But it does mean that I'm going to have to miss my workout and rearrange a couple of appointments that I have. So do you really need me? Let me share a personal example that happened just last week around this very dynamic. The parent of a good friend of ours passed away, and the funeral was just this past weekend. We also had one of our kids and her family, Rachel and her family, were coming into town. And so we had some family stuff going on, and then we had this funeral, had a lot of different things going on. And my wife, this friend of ours is a really good friend of my wife's and has been since like 6th grade. And so she really felt like she needed to go and show up. And the debate was whether or not I should go, whether or not some of the kids should go, or how to make it all work and how to cover all the bases. And so she said, well, I don't think anybody's even going to want to go with me. And I was kind of processing through all the different things, so I didn't really say anything right in the moment. My wife was assuming that nobody would want to go up there. And she was kind of conflicted because she wanted to feel supported. She didn't want to miss time with the kids. She also wanted to show up for our friend. Thinking actually of this example, I think it might have been the same day that I had the session with this person. But I just said, okay, so let me try to be really clear. Ellen, that's my wife's name. I am absolutely willing to go up there with you. In fact, I want to. I want to be supportive of our friend as well. And I want to be there for you. Funerals are kind of hard for us. And I also am worried about our kids. And I don't want them feeling like we're not there for them. And so if you need me there for you, that's absolutely the most important thing. And I will be there. If you feel like you're okay doing that, then I think it's also important for us to be there for our kids. And we were able to just have a quick conversation and clarify the meaning so that neither one of us was assuming where the other person was coming from and needlessly getting our feelings hurt. Okay, so let me return to my client in that situation. So if she would have said that to him, how would he likely have responded? He probably would have said something like, oh, wow, no, don't even worry about it. They said it's only going to be about an hour and I can just sit here and wait. If he understood her temperament and how her brain is wired, he could have also set up the situation a little differently from the start. He could have said something like, hey, I've got a favor to ask. If it works for you, it's not a big deal, ... And that's it. Miscommunication averted. No resentment, no unspoken expectations. This is important because not really understanding what the problem was influenced not only this situation, but subsequent interactions. Because he felt bad about the way things had gone, he thought, okay, I'm certainly not going to ask her for help the next time. In fact, his car was being worked on just like the next week. And instead of asking her for help, he sat there for like 3 hours because he did not want a repeat of the same situation. Was his asking for help the problem? No, it wasn't. We absolutely need to be able to ask for help and support from our people. That is one of the great benefits and blessings of family. We're not alone. We're not on our own. The problem in this situation was the lack of communication and the assumptions that they each made. I hope that after we process the situation in our session, that it will help them avoid similar situations in the future. If this kind of situation feels familiar to you, if you often find yourself feeling underappreciated or overcommitted or both, start here. Pause before you say yes. Ask for clarity by checking the meaning. Are you saying this? Hey, I want to make sure that I'm understanding. This is what I hear you saying. Third, don't leave you, what you need or want, out of the equation. Don't self-abandon. It's not healthy, it's not necessary, and it doesn't work. A relationship cannot just work for one person in the relationship. And if you want to understand the wiring behind why this dynamic keeps showing up in your life, either because you are the C, or your partner is the C, or your kid is a C, take the free C.O.R.E assessment today at whatsmycore.com. C.O.R.E is not about putting a label on yourself or on somebody else. It's about giving you language to know how your brain and your body respond to connection and how to work with it instead of against it. You do not need to stop being thoughtful. You just need to stop assuming that others' brains work the same way that yours does. You can care deeply without constantly feeling like you have to prove your worth. Thank you for watching. If you want to learn more about this very topic, watch this video about what happens when family communication goes sideways.